guests today are Sheri Dressler, and Ron Eaglin. We join their conversation in the faculty lounge.
Forest with your team in the middle of nowhere. You know that there's nobody else around. Your cell phones don't work because you're way out of where there's coverage. That's awesome, though.
So now, is this always done in teams?
Teams, well, they do allow solos in some races, but most of the time with the team. I have a 4-person team.
And it's the same team? These is friends of yours who go together?
For the last 3 years, I've raced with the same team. And this year I've been racing with different people, different teams. Last year I raced so many races by the end of the year I was just so tired all the time because I was doing a race basically every 3 weeks I was doing a race. And you can consider that the races are 24 to 48 hours minimum. And every 3 weeks you're going without the sleep and you're doing this thing, and then you're trying to keep up with your training. So I was so beat down in the body, so this year I'm going to do nothing more than have fun. I'm going to go out and enjoy it. And I'm finding that even as I'm enjoying it, I'm still racing at a good level. I'm actually racing competitive level. I qualified for nationals, which I couldn't believe it, in the very first race this year. And we were just doing it for sheer fun. We didn't even, we started with a paddle, and me and my partner were just out there, and all these boats were passing by us, and we did not care. We were just going to go our pace and kayaking along this section, and we got to the first transition area. We were very close to the last place, and we didn't care. As it turned out, though, when it got to be nightfall, and all the teams had to go out and do this long, arduous bike through a Half Moon Wildlife Management Area. And it was very tricky, and the navigation was hard, and people were getting lost. And we just basically went boom, 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 and hit all the points that we needed to hit and got back. So we get done, and we're up near the front again. So we weren't trying hard or pushing hard. We just were doing our thing. But it turned out our thing was good.
Well, it's probably true for almost anything you do. If you're doing it in the right spirit and you're
and we were enjoying it. We were definitely having a good time. Mm-hmm. We were joking around, and one of our teammates, you have to carry all your food and everything because you got a big old backpack on with everything you need and your food and your water. And we get to this one spot and we sit down, and one of my teammates had been feeling really sick the day before, and he hadn't been feeling well, but he reaches into his backpack and he pulls out a bunch of Whoppers, big Burger King Whoppers. Ooh. And in a race, anything that's food. And he goes, "I've got a Whopper." "You've got a Whopper?" He actually had 2 of them. So of course we just snarfed down the Whopper, snarfed down the food, because that was real food. And we've been living off of goo packs and gels and all this race food. But that always perked me up. So
I'm just wondering, what do you think in your personality or background has led you to make a choice to do this kind of extreme activity, since most people wouldn't necessarily choose it?
Oh gosh, probably obsessive compulsive disorder. I try to not to be obsessive about things, but my whole background, when I was a kid, I lived in the woods. That was it. And I wish it was like that today. And where I live, I can throw my kids outside and say, "Go out and play." But today, the way things work is, you're afraid to send your kids outside and just go. But when I was a kid, that was we would be miles away from the house, off in the woods somewhere, just being in the woods, being boys. And so that was my way I had grown up. You did your homework, and then as soon as you got your homework done until dinner, you had playtime. And the parents weren't carting you off to soccer and piano and guitar and all that. You were just playing. Mm-hmm. So you come home and you eat dinner, and then if there's still light out in the summer, summers were great because summers you were outside all the time. You could just go out and so I had grown up in the woods. And now the way it works is, you're a professor, you're in an office, air conditioned, computer, cell phone. And when it comes to Friday, there's nothing, all I want to do on Saturday morning is get on my bike and go riding and come home in that evening. And, when I'm really lucky now because my kids are old enough to do that stuff with me. And that's all you want to do. You want to go out and just be away from all that. And that stayed with me. So racing not only takes you away from that, it takes you way away from that. Because you're in a 3-day race. I mean, you're within the first day, you're dirty, you're probably muddy, you've probably crossed a few creeks. You're living on survival mode of whatever food you've got in your pack, and it's awesome. And it's just getting back to kind of your gut core being.
Mm-hmm.
So that I like.
Well, it's an interesting way to balance a kind of almost sedentary existence at the university.
Yeah, and that is, I mean, most jobs today, it's a sedentary existence. There's there's not a lot of room for activity. I'm not super into spectator sports, but I love sports. Mm-hmm. But there's two ways to look at sports. One is you do it, or you play, you're involved, you're active. Because I play soccer with my kids all the time. They like to play soccer, so and there's no way to just send them out and play. I got to go out and play with them. So that's what we do. In the evenings, I go out and we kick the ball up and down the street, and they're outside playing anyway. And one thing that I see them is, in fact, it's funny because last Friday, I came home and they had been, they're off of school, so they'd been playing PlayStation inside. They've been playing the PlayStation games, and they kind of look like little zombies there with their eyes glazed over, looking at the TV with that. And I'm going, come on, I've got 2 girls. I said, come on, girls, let's go out and go for a hike somewhere. I said, I got some really cool place to hike that we want to go check out. Oh, no, we're tired, Dad. Well, they had been made, you get tired when you do stuff like that. It wears you out, but it wears you out mentally, and so you kind of get that. So I said, no, you girls, getting up, get your shoes on, we're going to go out and have some fun. So I took them over to the Oviedo Riverside, where there's a trail that's running along the river there. And we get out there, and it's been raining a whole lot, so it's all flooded. And we get to the first spot, and it's a water crossing, and we jump over that, so that's not too bad. And we get to the next spot, and there's a water crossing, and this one's, you're not jumping over this. My wife is with me, and she's going, oh, God, you're going to get the kids wet, you're going to get the car. I said, no, I'll carry them across. So, of course, you can't just, they're 9 and 10. You can't just carry them across. They're going to get wet. So I take them across, of course, immediately turn around and go right back in the water and get all wet. But now they're perked up. So after this, we're running down the trail, and they're looking for places to cross water. And now they found some frogs, and they've got the little bitty frogs. So they've got a handful of these little bitty frogs. And we were out there for an hour and a half, and they came back home energized. If I'd let them sit there and play those PlayStation games, they would have just been, that would have been, so one of the evils of society.
Well, I think that's right. My background is psychology, and it's interesting that some of these relatively passive physical kinds of activities can be actually depressing for people, like passively watching the TV, this kind of thing, although people don't realize that they're getting depressed doing it. And so when you get them out into that kind of activity, it actually has a psychological effect as well, just as you're describing. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, they were all energized after that. Of course, then I couldn't get them to bed because they were so hyped up from having so much fun on their hike. We were out there for a good 2 hours, and it was. And the thing with that is, getting kids to hike is a hard thing anyway, because unless it's interesting, you can't just say, oh, let's go. Because for most adults who say, let's go hiking, they're going to get the staff and go through the woods, and they'll just kind of enjoy the motion and the sound of that. Kids need a little bit more activity. So my kids, what I also do, I'll take them geocaching, which is a sport where you actually go out and find that you can go on the internet, find the location of a hidden treasure. There's hundreds of them. They're everywhere, all hidden there. You find them on the internet, and then you go there and you find it. Perfect for kids because most of the treasures are just toys, little McDonald's toys. And so I can take them, and they've learned how to use a GPS, so they're actually pretty good at reading the coordinates and moving around. This time of year it's tough on them because if I go out in the middle of the day, it is so hot. It's the summer, and in the winter it's great sport but then again, they've got school most of the time, so they don't get much time to do it. But that's, again, an outdoor type of activity. That's a mentally engaging activity. Because the hardest thing for kids that age is really things like hiking. Where's the point? Now, getting out and playing soccer, that's a totally different story. They love the fact that they can score on Dad, because they get the little soccer goals set up, and they're pretty good little soccer players. But those are things that, for kids, those are the things they should be doing. And I didn't even get upset with my elementary school teachers because they assign way too much drudgery homework, repetitive. and it takes the kids 2 to 3 hours to finish through this repetitive homework. And I think kids learn a lot better by just playing games. If it's not engaging and not active, because my kids, they got to do their homework, this is punishment. It's torture. So I think we're teaching the kids that schoolwork should be an unenjoyable thing, but it shouldn't be an unenjoyable thing. You can actually make this stuff decently fun if you just get a little creativity and you exercise some fun put some fun into it.
I agree with you completely. I work with experiential learning on the campus, so for me, learning through experience is central to what I think is a really important aspect of education and something that's often left out. So I agree with you completely. Yeah. And I feel that way partially because for me, that's what happened when I was in education. I learned how to do all that rote stuff, but when I got to higher education, it was much easier for me to actually go and be involved in the situation and understand it better. And then I would want to go and do that kind of arduous looking for the facts and this written down. So it kind of matched my personality. And it's interesting to me, I'm wondering, for you, it sounds like part of the purpose for doing these things is not just physical, it's also mental, that it involves your mind so much.
It's completely mental. I mean, I like to experience things. That's the whole thing. And most of the passive things that you do isn't a level of experience. I mean, I guess growing up was probably, if I was growing up today, they'd probably say, okay, he's ADD, he's ADHD, he's hyperactive. I mean, my parents put up with a lot from me because, it's constantly, I was into everything, but I had no attention span whatsoever. I've learned to handle that no attention span by doing multiple things at once. As soon as you get even when I'm behind my computer at my desk, I've got an email going. At the same time, I'm writing a paper. At the same time, I'm talking on the phone, and I switch between the activities because as soon as I get bored with one activity, I just move to the next one. But I've learned to flip my mind back to the other one. So when you're dealing with kids in that type of scenario, most people see that as a down thing, but a kid who might be ADD could also at the same time be incredibly intelligent and energetic. And those people who are hyperactive when they're children are energetic when they're adults, So it's not so bad to have a hyperactive child because when you're an adult, if you can channel that energy, you can be extremely productive. And on the experiential side, because experiential thing is something I see also, you have a certain fixed amount of time that your mind is going to go into a learning mode. And if you're experiencing something that you're learning through experiences, you're compressing a ton of learning into a shorter period of time that you can actually put onto that thing. I find that people learn at a much faster rate, and they learn. And one thing that we as educators, and all educators, many educators are guilty of this, is thinking that we got this list of things that people have to learn. And if they don't learn any one of those things, we failed at our job. And so what we end up doing is we end up whitewashing the whole thing. They learn a little bit of everything, but they never learn any one thing in depth. And the way I see it is, what we're teaching them is just things that are going to be things that help them in the experience of job and life and other stuff. And throw some mud at it, and whatever you hit's good because you might have hit those few things pretty well. If you missed a few things, the truth of the matter is you're probably missing them anyway. You may think that they're getting all 20 items, knowing at least a level, but the truth of the matter is they're probably going to forget 10 of those items as soon as they're out of that class anyhow. So if they can get 2 or 3 of them that'll actually stick with them, that's better than getting 20 that won't, that most of them won't stick. And you're right. And experiential learning is how you're going to get that. If you really truly experience stuff. I teach my classes that way too. Teach them as service learning classes and experiential classes.
Oh, that's good to hear.
Yeah, everything I do is I'm also, and of course, one of the things I very much dislike in education and in classes is the concept of the exam, the test. Because, the joke is I tell my students, it says, okay, what's going to happen is after you finish school, you're going to get out and you're going to be working for a firm. And if it's a publicly traded firm, publicly traded firms live a lot of times on the quarter. And so here's how we do our quarterly statements. Instead of actually doing a financial statement, what we need to do is get everybody in the firm to take a test. And they take the test, and all the other firms take the same test. And whichever firm scores the highest on the test gets the highest stock value. Well, the concept is ludicrous. but it's how we educate. It's what we do. I mean, the kids that score higher on the test, that isn't how things are measured at all. The measurement in reality is, what can you do, and what are your skills and your talents, and what can you contribute with energy to the bottom line. If you're working for a company, it has nothing to do how well you do on a test. So by going with experiences and making them do actual things, that making them do assignments and stuff that's real world, you're better preparing them. Throwing in that tests are great for professors because they're easy to, you just set a grade, and it's a lot easier to grade somebody with a test than it is to grade them by, okay, that piece of art looks better than that piece of art, therefore you get an A and you get a B, because it's very just subjective. But so, that's the whole philosophy, and for education, it's a philosophy that I kind of try to live by. So I try to minimize the test. You still got to give them, but just kind of push it to the side and get the real stuff in there.
Well, I think that's right. Also, because so often you're going back to that idea of what kind of outcomes are we really trying to get.
Yeah.
We really limit those outcomes often to this kind of very disciplined, specific, factual information, and all the soft skills get left out because we don't necessarily think that those are the things that higher education is supposed to provide.
Yeah.
But that's the glue that allows students to use all that discipline-specific
Well, how do you measure your
stuff.
students? I mean, how do you grade your students? How do you in your classes that you teach?
Well, it depends which classes you're talking about.
Just pick a class.
Well, because I teach counseling,
Uh-huh.
but I also run the Experiential Learning Center, and we also have classes that are experiential learning.
Yeah.
So the experiential learning classes are pass-fail,
Yeah.
but the counseling courses are not. So I would use the counseling course in this example, and I try to do as much experiential applied learning as I can. I have them taking all these concepts and applying it to their life, applying it to situations, case studies, so that it's not just loose information that, as you say, is going to be gone a few days after they leave the classroom.
Yeah.
But
Which is, that's because that's one of the big things is how do you actually, when you're teaching a real class, I mean, how do you, if you're going to try to take that exam out of the thing, I mean, how do you actually measure the students? So I've been lucky enough that they've been and when I first volunteered for this assignment, I was kind of apprehensive because I was throwing more work in my direction, but I volunteered to teach the honors engineering seminar. And the whole concept of the class is basically teach the kids to do research, that they can understand research. So I go in there, and I find that they're actually pretty good at doing research. When I first started, some of them were strong, some of them weren't strong. And I taught the class a few times, and as I got better at teaching the class, I said, I need to come up with some way to better measure these students, because it's an honors class. So there's only 20 students, so you got a very limited group, and you get to know them. And they're really, really smart. I mean, you realize I'm going, God, was I that smart when I was in college? Because these kids are brilliant. They come up with brilliant ideas. They're most of them are very uncertain of themselves. They don't realize their own talents, but they're also, I think for a lot of them have been beaten down so much that they're almost afraid to take that leap to the next step. And also being honor students, they have an extreme fear of failure. That's one of the things I've learned about the top level students. They can't fail. They're driven to the point. But what I said is, okay, well, I need a way to grade this, and I need something that's different. I've got a few things I know that I want them to learn, and that's how to write a literature review. And I need to know them, and they need to have how to conduct an experiment. So those will be 2 assignments. They've got to do that. But that's not enough. And I said, well, instead of giving a test, I just threw all the tests out, and I said, let's just say there's 10 assignments, and here's what 2 of them are, and now I've got 8 other assignments. Let's just have them do whatever they think is worth an assignment. So I give them all sorts of ideas. Write a piece of creative work, give a good presentation, volunteer for something, and demonstrate the volunteer work to me. So now the way I've done the class is they have 10 things that they have to do. And for some of the students it's really tough because it's so loose. Well, what 10 things do you want us to do? I'm not going to tell you. You tell me what 10 things you can do. Here's 2 that I've already started you with. So I have them keep a blog, which is kind of getting them used to actually, when they say something in public, it's a lot different from things that they'll say in when you put something and you post it to the internet and it's a public thing, you think a whole lot more about what you say than when you submit something to a professor on a piece of paper, because you know that your audience is only that one professor. And when you put something out in public, you know that your audience is everybody. But then I see that they actually go and start flaming each other on their blogs because they get into these discussions that they have different points of view. And I throw them on, really topics like I go with global warming, myth, reality. Okay. Amazingly enough, you get just widely varying viewpoints, and the students will get argumentative with them. And then I go, okay, well, I learned from that they need to learn to do critical thinking, because then we go into this exercise where I'll give them a point, 1 point for a class, if they can demonstrate solid critical thinking skills in the classroom. And they go in and they make these great arguments, and they're looking for their point, and they don't get it. And why didn't I get the point? Well, when you find out why you didn't get the point, then I'll give you the point. And of course, the reality of why they didn't get the point was because they interjected viewpoint and opinion into the critical thinking. And you can't do that and be a solid critical thinker. You have to completely divorce yourself, your opinion and your viewpoint, from the arguments that you make. I mean, you have to be good at debate. But debate is also one of those great things that all university students should learn how to debate. There should be a class that requires them to debate. Because in debating, you have to think, and you have to remove yourself, and you lose debates. As soon as you start throwing in your opinion, you just killed yourself in the debate. So that's an important step in critical thinking. So as they figured this out, they're like, well, we got to figure out how to get that point that we haven't gotten. And so we had a few classes where they would go through and they'd be doing the debating, and they'd be going back and forth, and I'd be going, you're so close to a point. Too bad you shot yourself in the foot with that last statement. They figured it, most of them did figure it out, and they eventually did earn the point that they were looking for. But it took them a while. So, and I throw them in teamwork exercises, but that's kind of a different approach to taking to the class. You have to do 10 things. There's a few things that I want you to get out of the class, and you have to demonstrate to me that you can do those. But everything else is to demonstrate, hey, can you think critically? Can you go beyond the boundaries that you've set for yourself? Because most people, and I find all people, they have a perception of their capabilities. They don't know the reality of their capabilities. They have their own perception. Adventure racing has taught me that. The first time I did a 24-hour race, before I went into that 24-hour race, I thought there is absolutely no way I can do this. When full 24 hours, continuously going, nonstop, and I got to the end of the 24 hours, I'm like, I feel pretty good. I don't feel like this is beyond what I thought I could do. So then I went to the 2-day, and I went to the 3-day, and I went to the 5-day. Every time I moved the next step forward, I go, I didn't think I could do this before I did it. And I realized the real realization was, I had set my own perception of what my physical limitations were never tested. I didn't know what they truly were because I never actually tested them. So putting myself to that test moved my perception of what my physical limits are. So now I've come to the realization I don't know what they are. I don't know what my mental limits are, and so I'm not going to put those limits on myself to start with. Because as soon as you start putting those limits on yourself, you're putting a glass ceiling, but you're making your own glass ceiling. Don't put it there in the first place, and then maybe you'll bump up against something, but at least you know where it is.
Well, and we actually do that as society.
Society does that too, yeah.
We've decided that we're going to be aggressive forever. We have these imaginations. We say everything in the past is going to match what's happened in the present and the future, and the result is then we don't try because we're convinced that there's no possibility, and that's really sad. We create dichotomies that aren't real. So I agree with you completely. I'm fascinated, though, because I'm really attracted to the idea of being able to be so open about assignments. I know that certainly in departments that I've interacted with, there's a real resistance to do that because there's the expectation that the students will come back and say, you have to show me why I'm getting this grade, not getting this grade, and it's all very prescribed. Mm-hmm. And of course, you also get students who simply say, I want to know exactly line by line what I have to do, and I'm going to do it, and then at the end, you get stamped, and that's it. And they're so anxious any other way that they create an environment that's very difficult in the classroom. I love what you're doing, and I wish we could bottle it. Well,
I think, actually things there's universities that they don't necessarily bottle it, but they actually use that. I mean, if you go, When we're at a big state school, we got 40, almost 50,000 students, and when you're at that size, and I love UCF. I love the environment. I love the dynamics of the university, but I also understand the reality of, as a big state school, it's assembly line of stamp, move, and so the individualistic personality of the students gets lost. In the Honors College itself, because I went to an honors college, I was at South Carolina College. We were much smaller than UCF's honors college. I think the UCF's honors college probably has, I think they admit almost 500 plus students, which to me is huge. That's too big. An honors college should be a small group. If in an honors college, if you don't know every other student in the honors college, it's too big. When I went to the honors college, I knew every other student in my class. You knew them all, and you went to the same classes with them because it was that small. And the professors that we had, I had James Dickey. You know who he was, and he was a character. And I actually, experiencing professors that were and these professors, they don't care what their department chair is going to think of them on evals and things like that. They're going to go in there. Now they are devoted. They want to teach students. And you meet these people and you see their minds going in these different directions. And of course, you're trying to get a good perception, to have them have a good perception of you because you want a grade.